The sun was dying again.
My
Every
God.
day, it died the same way in the small town of Copper Ridge, burning orange and red, then disappearing behind the mountains like it was tired of the world. Samuel Whitmore stood outside his ranch house and watched it happen. He had watched it happen for 37 years. The sun went down, the cold came, the stars appeared, then the sun came back up and nothing had changed. His ranch was called the Red Stone Ranch, but there was nothing beautiful about it anymore. The barn doors hung loose on their hinges, creaking in the wind like they were crying. The fence posts were broken and leaning, some of them so old they looked like they might turn to dust if you touched them. The house itself was gray and tired, with paint peeling off like dead skin. The roof had holes in it. When it rained, Samuel put buckets everywhere in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the hallway. Sometimes he forgot to move them, and they overflowed onto the floor. Samuel was 63 years old, but his face looked like it belonged to someone much older. His skin was burned dark by the sun. Deep lines ran across his forehead and around his eyes. His hands were rough and cracked, with scars that told stories nobody wanted to hear anymore. He had a thin beard that was completely gray. His hair was long and wild because he had stopped going to town to get it cut. He had stopped going to town for most things. The truth was simple. Samuel Whitmore was a man who had run out of reasons to try. He had come to Copper Ridge when he was young and strong, with dreams about building something great. He had a wife named Mary then. She was beautiful and kind. They were going to fill the ranch with children and animals and laughter. They were going to make something that lasted. But Mary got sick in the winter of 1889. She got a fever that wouldn't break. The doctor from town couldn't help her. No one could help her. She died on a cold morning in March, and Samuel buried her in the small graveyard on the hill behind the ranch. He was 26 years old. After Mary died, Samuel threw himself into the work. He bought cattle. He hired men to help. He worked from sunrise to sunset, pushing himself harder and harder, thinking that if he just worked hard enough, the pain would go away. But the pain never went away. It just changed shape. It got quieter, but it never left. Then, one year, a terrible drought came. For 18 months, no rain fell on the land. The grass turned brown and died. The cattle grew thin and weak. Samuel watched them die one by one. He sold the herd for almost nothing, just to try to keep some money in his pocket. The men who had worked for him left to find better jobs in other places. Samuel couldn't blame them. There was nothing here anymore. After that, Samuel lived alone, completely alone. He had one horse left, an old brown horse named Clay, who was almost as tired as Samuel was. Clay remembered the good days when the ranch had life. The horse would sometimes look at Samuel with sad eyes, like he was asking, "What happened to us?" Samuel didn't have an answer. Years passed. Samuel fixed the barn just enough so the animals didn't freeze in winter. He grew vegetables in a small garden. He hunted rabbits and sometimes deer. He didn't need much. He barely ate. He barely slept. He just existed, day after day, watching the sun die and come back and die again. The neighbors had all moved away. The closest town, Copper Ridge, was 8 miles away. Samuel went there maybe once a month for supplies. He didn't talk to anyone. The store owner, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, would say hello to him, but Samuel would just nod and leave. He had nothing to say to people anymore. People wanted to talk about things that didn't matter: the weather, the price of grain, gossip about who was marrying who. Samuel couldn't care about those things. He was just waiting for his life to end. People in town had forgotten about Samuel Whitmore. He was invisible to them. They had their own families, their own problems, their own futures. Samuel had no future. He had no family. He had nothing. On the morning when everything changed, Samuel woke up like he did every morning. He was lying on a thin mattress with a blanket that had more holes than cloth. The sun was coming through the window, and dust particles were floating in the light, dancing like they had nowhere else to be. Samuel lay there for a long time, not moving. He was thinking about how many more mornings he would have to wake up like this. How many more days of the same thing? How many more years of nothing? He got up slowly. His joints hurt. Everything hurt. He put on his old clothes, the same clothes he wore every day, brown and stained and falling apart. He went outside to check on Clay. The horse was standing in the corral, looking at the mountains in the distance. Samuel gave him some hay and water. He ran his hand along the horse's neck, and for a moment he felt something. Just for a second. A feeling that meant he was still alive. Then it was gone. It was Tuesday morning. The sun was already hot. Samuel knew it would be a day like every other day, empty and long and full of nothing. He decided to ride out to the far part of his property, just to have something to do. It was the part near the canyon, the deep canyon that cut through the land like a scar. Samuel never went there anymore. It was a dangerous place, but today he didn't care about danger. As he was getting ready to leave, he heard something. It was a sound coming from far away, carried on the wind from the direction of the canyon. It was a sound Samuel had never heard before in all his years on the ranch. It was a horse crying out, not a normal neigh or whinny, but a cry of pure pain and fear and desperation. It was the sound of something that was suffering badly. Samuel stopped. He stood very still. He listened. The cry came again, and something inside Samuel, something that had been dead for a very long time, suddenly woke up.
Samuel stood frozen in the dirt yard, listening. The cry came again, weaker this time, like whatever was making that sound was running out of strength. Without thinking, without planning, Samuel moved. He tied Clay to the fence post and grabbed his rope from a barn. He didn't take water. He didn't take food. He just took the rope and started walking toward the canyon. The canyon was about 2 miles from the ranch house. As Samuel walked, the land changed. The grass became shorter. The rocks became bigger and more scattered. The air got cooler because the sun couldn't reach down into the deep places where the canyon cut into the earth. Samuel had been to this canyon before, but not in many years. Maybe 10 years. Maybe more. He remembered why he had stopped coming. The canyon was a scary place. It was beautiful in a dark way. The red rocks towered above him, hundreds of feet high, with strange shapes that looked like sleeping giants or ancient monsters. The walls were so close together in some places that you could almost touch both sides at the same time. The canyon was always in shadow, even when the sun was bright outside. Inside the canyon, it felt like the world had forgotten about time. Samuel walked deeper. The cry didn't come again, but he kept going. He could feel something pulling him forward, something he couldn't explain. It was like the sound had hooked into his chest and was pulling him toward whatever was hurt and suffering. The path got narrower. Samuel had to watch his feet, so he wouldn't slip on the loose rocks. His heart was beating faster than it had beaten in years. He was breathing harder. His body was telling him to go back, to return to his quiet life where nothing happened. But something else, something stronger, was telling him to keep going. Then he saw her. The Mustang was trapped between 2 enormous boulders that had fallen together at an angle, creating a wedge-shaped space. The boulders were massive, each one as big as a small house. They had probably fallen like this hundreds of years ago, and nobody had moved them because nobody could move them. They were the weight of mountains. The horse was a young Mustang, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Her coat was the color of gold and honey, shining even in the dim light of the canyon. But her beauty made her situation even more terrible. Her back left leg was wedged deep into the space between the boulders. The rest of her body was twisted and bent in a way that looked wrong. Her ribs were showing through her skin. Her eyes were wide and wild and full of panic. Her mane was matted with sweat and dirt. There was blood on the rocks around her. When Samuel stepped into her line of sight, the Mustang tried to move. She pulled backward, trying to free her leg. The movement made her cry out, that same desperate cry Samuel had heard from so far away. The sound was so full of pain that it made Samuel's eyes water. "Easy, girl," Samuel said softly. "Easy. Do not move. Please do not move." The Mustang thrashed again, and Samuel realized that every time she pulled, she was making her leg hurt more. The boulders had her trapped. Every movement pushed her leg deeper into the wedge. If she kept struggling, she would break the bone, or she would bleed to death. She needed to stop moving. She needed to understand that fighting would only make things worse. Samuel sat down on the ground, about 20 feet away from the Mustang. He sat very still and very quiet. He just watched the horse. The Mustang was breathing fast, her whole body shaking. Her eyes were rolling. She was terrified. Samuel began to speak in the gentlest voice he had left. It was a voice he hadn't used in so long that it almost sounded strange coming out his mouth. "I am here now," he said softly. "You are not alone anymore. I know you are scared. I know you are hurting. But I am here, and I'm going to help you. Can you hear me, girl? Can you understand?" The Mustang's breathing began to slow. She stopped thrashing. She kept her eyes on Samuel. It was like she understood that this man was not going to hurt her. This man was different from the canyon. This man was not going to crush her or trap her. This man was gentle. Samuel stayed very still. He did not move closer. He did not try to touch her. He just sat in the dust and spoke to her in his soft voice, telling her that she was going to be okay, telling her that he had seen worse things than this, telling her that strength sometimes means being still and being patient. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky above the canyon, but down in the shadows where Samuel and the Mustang were, the light barely changed. Samuel's legs got stiff from sitting. His back hurt. His old body was telling him that this was too much, that he should go back home. But he did not move. The Mustang stopped being wild. She became quiet. She lowered her head slightly. She was no longer pulling at her trap leg. She was waiting. She was listening to Samuel's voice. "My name is Samuel," he said. "I am old. I am tired. I have forgotten a lot of things in my life. But I remember how to help. I remember how to stay. I am not going to leave you here alone. That is a promise. A real promise, not the kind people break." When the sun started to get lower in the sky, Samuel knew he could not leave. The Mustang needed him. And Samuel, after so many years of not needing anything and not being needed, realized that he needed her too. He needed to know that he could still do something that mattered. He needed to know that he was still alive. He moved closer very slowly, 1 foot at a time. The Mustang watched him but did not panic. When he got close enough, he reached out his weathered hand and touched her neck. Her skin was hot from fever and fear. He could feel her heartbeat under his palm, fast and strong. She was alive. Against all the odds in that terrible canyon, she was still alive. "We are going to do this together," Samuel whispered. "Both of us are trapped, girl. But maybe we can free each other." Samuel looked at the Mustang's trapped leg carefully. The way the rocks were positioned, there was no way to simply pull the horse out. The boulders were too heavy, and the angle was wrong. He would need a different plan. He would need to move the rocks, or at least move them enough to create space for the horse's leg to come free. Samuel walked around the boulders, studying them from every angle. His mind was working in a way it hadn't worked in years. He was solving a problem. He was thinking about something other than his own sadness. It felt strange and good at the same time. The rocks had fallen in such a way that they were resting against each other. If Samuel could move one rock even a little bit, it might shift the other. If he could create even 6 inches of extra space, the Mustang might be able to pull her leg free. But the rocks were massive. They weighed thousands of pounds. Samuel went back to the Mustang and spoke to her again. "I'm going to try something now," he said. "It might hurt. You might want to struggle, but you have to trust me. Can you do that?" The Mustang's eyes were calmer now. She was no longer the wild, panic animal Samuel had first seen. She had accepted her situation. She was waiting for help. Samuel used his rope to create a simple pulley system, tying it to a higher rock that was stable and strong. He pulled at the rope to test it. It held. It was not much, but it was something. Then he started to dig. He used his hands and a sharp rock to dig away the smaller stones around the Mustang's trapped leg. The work was slow and painful. His fingers bled almost immediately. The rocks were sharp, and they cut into his skin. His nails broke. His palms got raw. But Samuel did not stop. Every few minutes, he would check on the Mustang, making sure she was still calm. He would speak to her softly, telling her what he was doing, why he was doing it, promising her that this would help. The Mustang seemed to understand. She remained almost completely still, which made Samuel's job easier. Hours passed. The sun continued to move across the sky. Samuel's back was screaming in pain from bending and digging. His legs were shaking from the effort. His whole body was covered in dust and blood. But slowly, very slowly, the space around the Mustang's leg was getting bigger. As the afternoon turned toward evening, Samuel could see that some of the smaller rocks had been removed. The trapped leg had a little more room now, but it was not enough yet. The large boulders were still pressing too hard. Samuel stood up and grabbed his rope. He tied one end to the pulley system he had made, and the other end around the larger of the two boulders. Then he pulled. He pulled with all the strength that was left in his old body. Nothing happened. The boulder did not move even an inch. Samuel rested for a moment, breathing hard. Sweat was running down his face, mixing with the dust and making mud on his skin. He looked at the Mustang. She was watching him. She was waiting. She had not given up, and neither could he. He tried again. This time, he wrapped the rope around his waist as well, using his whole body as leverage. He leaned back and pulled. His muscles were shaking. His face was turning red. The veins in his neck were standing out. But the boulder was moving, just slightly, just a tiny bit. But it was moving. When Samuel finally had to rest, he had moved the boulder perhaps 4 or 5 inches. It was not much, but it was progress. The space between the rocks was growing. The Mustang's leg had more room now. "We are going to make it," Samuel said to the horse, though his voice was weak and tired. "We are both going to make it out of this place." As night began to fall, Samuel realized he could not finish the work today. He was too tired. His body was failing him. But he did not leave the Mustang alone. Instead, he found a dry spot near her and lay down on the ground. He kept one hand on her neck while he slept, his fingers resting on her warm skin. The Mustang did not try to move. She stood in the darkness, with her legs still trapped, but she was no longer alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. When the sun came up the next morning, Samuel's body was even more sore than before. Every muscle hurt. His hands were swollen and covered with cuts. But he got up and continued the work. He dug more. He pulled the rope more. He pushed against the boulders with his shoulders, even though it felt like his bones might break. Around midday on the second day, something shifted. The large boulder moved more easily than it had before. Samuel pulled the rope, and this time the boulder rolled to the side. The space between the rocks opened up. It was suddenly much wider. "Now," Samuel said to the Mustang. "Now we try." The Mustang seemed to understand. She pulled her back leg, and this time it moved. It slid out from between the rocks. She screamed, a cry of pain so loud that it echoed to the entire canyon. It was the sound of a bone that had been bent wrong, of a muscle that had been crushed, of an animal in terrible pain. But she was free. The Mustang collapsed to the ground. Her trapped leg could not support her weight. She lay in the dust, her whole body trembling, her breathing rapid and shallow. Samuel fell to his knees beside her. He was crying. He did not know why he was crying, but the tears would not stop. "You did it," he said. "You did it, girl. You are free. You are free." Samuel sat beside the Mustang through the night again. He did not have water, but he tore pieces of his shirt and wet them with moisture from the rocks, and he used them to cool her head. He spoke to her through the long darkness, telling her stories about his life, about Mary, about the ranch, about all the years he had spent alone. By morning, the Mustang could not stand. Her leg was badly injured. Samuel knew he could not ride back to the ranch on Clay and leave her here. He had to help her walk. It would take hours. It would be the hardest thing he had ever done, but Samuel did not hesitate. He stood up, brushed the dust from his clothes, and began to help the Mustang to her feet. The journey out of the canyon took 10 hours. It should have taken 2, maybe 3 if Samuel had been alone. But he was not alone. The Mustang could barely walk. Her injured leg could not bear much weight. Every few steps, she would stumble. Every stumble made her cry out in pain. Samuel had to support her, holding on to her mane and her neck, helping her move forward one painful step at a time. They moved slowly through the canyon, the tall red rocks towering above them. Samuel talked to the Mustang constantly, not because she could understand his words, but because his voice seemed to calm her. It seemed to give her the strength to keep going. "We are almost out," Samuel would say. "Just a little bit more. You are so brave. I have never seen anything as brave as you." When they finally came out of the canyon into the late afternoon sunlight, both of them collapsed. Samuel fell to his knees, breathing hard. The Mustang lay down in the dirt, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and pain. They stayed there for a long time, neither of them moving, both of them barely breathing. But they could not rest for long. Night was coming, and Samuel knew that the Mustang needed shelter. She needed care. She needed a warm place to lie down. Samuel gathered what strength was left in his body and helped the Mustang to her feet again. They moved slowly across the desert toward the ranch. It was dark by the time they arrived, and Samuel was practically carrying the horse. His arms were aching. His legs were moving without his brain telling them to move. He was running on nothing but determination and something he had not felt in years, purpose. When they reached the barn, Samuel carefully helped the Mustang inside. He made a bed of fresh hay in the corner, the best spot in the barn, where it was warm and dry. He helped her lie down gently. Then he went to the house and gathered everything he could find: old blankets, clean cloth, water. For 3 days, the Mustang barely moved. She lay in the hay and breathed. That was all. Samuel stayed in the barn with her almost the entire time. He slept on the ground beside her. He washed her leg with clean water and cloth. He brought her food and water. He talked to her constantly. "You have to eat," he would say. "You have to get strong again. You have a whole life ahead of you. Do not give up now, not when you have come so far." On the 4th day, the Mustang ate a small handful of grain. On the 5th day, she drank water. On the 7th day, she stood up on 3 legs and tried to walk a few steps. Samuel was so happy that he laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from deep in the belly. He had forgotten what laughter felt like. Weeks passed. Samuel's entire life changed. Where before he had barely cared about the ranch, now he worked on it constantly. He needed to make it better for the Mustang. He fixed the barn roof so it would not leak. He cleaned out the stalls. He bought better hay from town. He even fixed the fence in the corral so it was strong and safe. The Mustang healed slowly. Her leg would always be a little bit crooked. She would always limp slightly when she walked. But she grew stronger every day. And as her body healed, something else happened. Her trust in Samuel grew. The Mustang would follow Samuel everywhere. If he went to fix the fence, she would come with him, staying close to his side. If he went to feed the chickens, she would watch him. At night, she would stand outside the barn door and wait for him. In the morning, when he came out of the house, the first thing she would do was whinny and come to him. Samuel gave her a name. He called her Storm. "Not because you are wild," he told her, "but because you survived the worst storm of your life, and you came through it stronger." Storm and Samuel became inseparable. They had saved each other. Samuel had saved Storm from death in the canyon, but Storm had saved Samuel too, saved him from a life of emptiness and loneliness. Storm had given him a reason to get up in the morning. Storm had given him hope. A year passed, 2 years, 5 years. Samuel was different now. He still looked old. He still had gray hair and wrinkled skin, but his eyes were different. There was light in them again. There was life. He smiled more. He even started going to town more often, and sometimes he would talk to people. Not much, but more than before. He brought Storm with him sometimes. People in Copper Ridge would see the old man and the golden Mustang walking down the dirt road together and they would smile. There was something beautiful about the way the horse looked at Samuel. There was something beautiful about the way Samuel's hand rested on the horse's neck. One day, Mrs. Patterson at the general store said to Samuel, "That is a special horse you have there, Mr. Whitmore. Where did you find her?" Samuel smiled. "She found me," he said, "in a canyon. We were both lost, and we found each other." By the 10th year, Samuel had completely rebuilt the ranch. The house had a new roof and fresh paint. The barn was strong and clean. He had bought more horses, and they all had the same calm, gentle nature as Storm. He even hired a young man named Thomas to help him with the work. Thomas would watch Samuel and Storm together, and he could see what nobody else seemed to understand. This old man loved that horse more than he loved anything, and the horse loved him back in a way that went beyond normal animal behavior. They were connected by something deeper than just a bond between a man and his horse. Storm never left Samuel's side. When he sat on the porch in the evening, she would stand beside him. When he worked in the garden, she would graze nearby. When he was sick with a cold, she would stand outside his bedroom window and wait until he was better. Years turned into a lifetime together. Samuel grew older and older. Storm grew older too. Her coat, which had been so golden and bright, began to turn gray. Her movements slowed, but she was always near Samuel. And Samuel, who had once been a man who had forgotten how to hope, had spent the last 10 years of his life full of hope, full of purpose, full of love. It had all started in the canyon, with a horse trapped between two rocks and an old man who still had one more act of kindness left inside him. Samuel Whitmore was 78 years old when his heart began to fail him. He did not notice it at first. He just felt tired, more tired than usual. His chest felt heavy, like someone was pressing down on it with a big stone. He would get out of breath walking from the house to the barn. He would have to sit down and rest more often. But Samuel did not complain. He did not tell anyone. He just kept working, kept caring for the horses, kept loving Storm. Storm was 23 years old now. In horse years, she was very old. Her coat was completely gray. She moved slowly and carefully. Her back was more crooked, but her eyes were still bright and clear. And she was still always with Samuel. One cold morning in November, Samuel woke up and knew something was very wrong. His chest was not just heavy anymore. It hurt. It hurt in a way that made it hard to breathe. His left arm was aching. Sweat was covering his skin, even though the room was cold. Samuel tried to stand up, but his legs would not obey him. He fell back onto his bed. He lay there in the darkness, understanding what was happening. His heart was dying, and he was going to die with it. He should have called for help. He should have sent Thomas, the young man who worked for him, to get the doctor from town. But Samuel did not want to die in a doctor's office or a hospital bed in some strange place. He wanted to stay in his home. He wanted to stay close to Storm. Samuel lay in his bed for 3 days. He could barely move. He could barely eat. He could barely drink water. His body was shutting down. The life was slowly leaving him, like water draining from a cup. Thomas came to check on him. He brought food. He brought water. He begged Samuel to let him ride to town to get the doctor. But Samuel refused. "Let me be," he said quietly. "Let me rest. This is how it is supposed to be." On the 4th day, Thomas left the door open because the room was hot. Samuel was lying in his bed, looking out the window at the gray sky. He could see the barn from his window. He could see the fence. He could see the place where he had spent the last 15 years building a life that meant something. Then something amazing happened. Storm broke through the barn door. Nobody knew how she did it. The door was heavy and strong. But somehow, the old horse had pushed through it with all her remaining strength. She came walking through the yard, limping badly because her old legs could not carry her weight very well anymore. She came straight to the house. She came straight to Samuel's bedroom. Storm pushed open the bedroom door with her muzzle. She walked to Samuel's bed and stood there, looking down at the old man who had saved her life so many years ago in that dark canyon. Samuel opened his eyes. For 3 days, his eyes had been empty and distant. But when he saw Storm, they suddenly focused. Life came back into them. Tears started to run down his face. "Storm," he whispered. "My beautiful girl, what are you doing?" Storm did something that nobody had ever seen a horse do before. She carefully, very carefully, lay down on the floor beside Samuel's bed. Her whole body was pressed against the bed. Her neck curved up so that her head rested near Samuel's pillow. She was lying down beside him, just like he had lain down beside her in the canyon all those years ago. Samuel reached out his trembling hand and felt her warm coat. He buried his fingers in her gray mane. He was crying so hard that his whole body was shaking. "You came to me," he said. "You came to stay with me, just like I stayed with you." They lay like that for hours. Samuel's hand never left Storm's neck. He could feel her heartbeat. He could feel her breathing. He was not alone. He would never be alone again. As the sun began to set that day, something changed inside Samuel. The pain in his chest was still there. His heart was still failing. But the fear was gone. The loneliness was gone. He had Storm. He had always had Storm. And she had come to him one last time. The next morning, Samuel woke up and realized that he could breathe better. The heavy feeling in his chest was lighter. He could move his arm. He could think more clearly. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew it was a miracle. Storm was still lying beside him. She had not moved all night. She had stayed there, keeping him warm, keeping him company, keeping him alive. Over the next few days, Samuel got stronger. His heart was still damaged. The doctor, when he finally came to the ranch, said it was a mystery. He should have died. There was no medical reason why he was still alive, but he was alive. Samuel knew the reason. It was not medicine. It was love. It was loyalty. It was a bond between a man and a horse that went beyond anything normal people could understand. Samuel lived for 5 more years. 5 more years of walking through the ranch with Storm beside him. 5 more years of sitting on the porch together and watching the sun set. 5 more years of knowing that he was loved, that he mattered, that his life had meant something. When Samuel finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83, Storm was lying beside him. She had always been beside him. Even in death, Storm did not leave him. Thomas found them together in the morning, the old man and the old horse, lying side by side, as if they were sleeping. They buried Samuel in the graveyard on the hill, next to Mary, the wife he had loved so many years ago, and they buried Storm beside him. The townspeople came to the funeral. They brought flowers. They brought words about what a good man Samuel had been. But the people who had known him best, the ones who understood his true story, knew that Samuel had been saved by something much greater than any words. He had been saved by loyalty. He had been saved by love. He had been saved by a golden Mustang who had taught him, in the silence between them, that a single moment of kindness can change a life forever. In the canyon where 2 broken souls had found each other, destiny had been rewritten, not by words, not by actions, but by silence, by the quiet understanding between a man and a horse, by the kind of love that does not need to speak to be heard. And in that silence, everything that mattered was said. The end.